All right, in our first half hour, we looked at Illinois politics, and now we're on the Iowa side. The 2025 legislative session was supposed to wrap up this past Friday, but lawmakers still have not decided on a budget. And until that happens, they're going to keep working. So joining us to break this down is Dana Searles of our sister station, WOI. All right, Dana, there are two sides to this. On one side is Governor Kim Reynolds and Senate Republicans, and on the other side is House Republicans, and they want about $36 million more for state services than the Senate and the governor. So what is going on here? Where is this discrepancy?
Different chambers want different things right now. Focusing on the House, though, the biggest holdup there is they want more funding for those para-educators. They said that's going to be the biggest sticking point for them to pass this budget, is to ensure that those para-educators are funded correctly. While Governor Reynolds released a statement actually just on Friday saying that in her statement she said that it's never been about funding para-educators in the budget. They've never had discussions on that. So she seemed to be a little bit confused, or also maybe against them in that sense. And although Senate Republicans and Governor Reynolds did agree to a budget, and that's kind of where this budget bill started, there are 12 Republican senators who actually signed a letter saying that they would not vote to pass the budget bill. So they would all vote no on the budget bill unless the Senate brings up eminent domain bills to debate in the Senate. So eminent domain has been a topic that has tried to get pushed across the finish line the past couple of sessions, and it's always held up in the Senate. So this year, those Senate Republicans who are for passing that eminent domain legislation, they are trying to put their foots down and saying they won't vote to pass that budget bill until that eminent domain is brought to the floor, at least for some sort of debate. It doesn't necessarily need to pass, but they do want to see it debated and talked about on the floor. So with that letter, if all 12 Republicans voted no for the budget bill in the Senate, and if all Senate Democrats voted against the budget bill, which is typically expected, that would actually break the Senate's majority, and those budget bills would fail. So that is something that the Senate is going to have to talk about and figure out as they move forward in this process.
While the budget wasn't passed just yet, late last week, the governor signed a whole flurry of bills into law. I mean, one that's waiting on her desk that she hasn't signed yet is all about bullying. I mean, this was certainly not a bipartisan law or bill. This was passed on party lines by state Republicans, and it would change the definition of bullying in Iowa. So if the governor signs it, what's going to happen?
So basically what it would do is it would remove a list of traits that a bully could target. So it would be things like sexual orientation, race, religion, and gender identity. So it would remove that list, and it would change the set definition, I wrote it down here, to actually be any repeated and targeted electronic, written, verbal, or physical act or conduct toward a student that creates an objectively hostile school environment. So that's what it would change the definition to. So those advocating for this bill say that it would make the law more consistent. However, those against say that current law doesn't limit bullies, and removing these traits and changing that definition, the wording around a little bit, they claim that it would make it harder to report bullying. So kind of a little bit of differing opinions in that, but I think the main key things to focus on would be those 4 traits that would be removed from the state law definition.
Yeah, I think this bill is so fascinating because you have both sides saying that if this other side isn't passed, or if this is passed, that bullying will get worse, so we won't be able to target bullying in Iowa. It's very interesting, the same conclusion from both sides of this bill. But finally, I wanted to talk to you about something that happened late last week. The Senate passed a bill that has to do with gender-affirming care. Now, we have no idea if this is going to be able to be passed before the session is over. Like I said, we're in overtime right now. But if this bill does become law, it would ban gender-affirming care from being covered by Medicaid in Iowa. Iowa lawmakers have tried this before. It's always been shot down by the courts. Why do they think it could work this time around?
So I think the big thing with this bill now, this time around, that is different is earlier in the session, we talked about it earlier, Governor Reynolds signed a bill into law that would remove gender identity as a protected civil right. So yeah, what it would do, it would, like you said, exactly not allow transgender Iowans to get health care through Medicaid. So it would remove things like, that would include things like surgeries, hormone therapy, and mental health care. And I think mental health care is a big one that advocates against this bill are focusing on, as it would take away all of those resources. So yeah, it was back in 2019 that a similar bill actually passed, and the judge cited that it didn't it didn't align with Iowa's constitution. So now that Iowa is changing, where gender identity is not a protected civil right anymore under the law Governor Reynolds signed this year, I think that's kind of the loophole that lawmakers are working for. But again, like you said, who knows what could happen? I think the big focus right now at the State House is getting that budget along the finish line and finding that agreement. But again, this is another very controversial bill that could, be very telling and determine kind of what would happen in the future in terms of health care for transgender Iowans.
Dana, as always, thank you so much for your time today. We'll keep watching and see if maybe the session will wrap up later this week. But for you guys at home, you can catch all of our political coverage on both sides of the river by heading over to WQAD.com and clicking on the As Seen on TV tab at the top of the homepage.